Hello and welcome. I'm Allison Bruner, writer and narrator of Medicine Stories, the heart and soul of my apprenticeship in earth-based spirituality. These stories share my personal experience as an apprentice in the Andean mystical tradition. I do not claim authority, nor do I intend these essays to represent its teachings or cosmology in any comprehensive way. I offer these stories with humility and gratitude, in the hope that they might serve as lanterns for others moving through change, uncertainty, and spiritual transformation. Please do not take them as instruction, nor as a template to follow. They're simply a reminder that none of us walks through life's initiations alone. Essay 2. On My Knees. Making sense of cruelty and finding meaning in the heart of darkness. You may have noticed, readers, that I've barely written over the last few months. It's because I've been wrestling with this story. It has taken me 2 full months to find these words, and honestly, it has been the most challenging thing I've ever written, well, in the last year. Writing this forced me to walk back into a pocket of pain I had been carrying for a long time. When the news cycle around the Epstein files began to surface last winter, the former client I mention in this story reached out to me, and she asked me, "I want you to tell my story." Her story was not mine to share, and as a therapist, the ethics of that are sacred to me. But I realized I could share my side of the experience, the perspective of the witness. I wrote this piece and shared it with her first, and only with her full blessing and permission am I putting it into the world now. My hope is that this brings a sense of peace to both of us. But more than that, I hope it offers something to those of you who were as triggered and shattered by those global revelations as I was. She lived through a version of it, and I stood witness to it. Now I am praying for healing for her, for every person on this planet, and for the earth herself. The tires hummed, a low, persistent drone against the asphalt of the countryside, while rattling the steering wheel and even echoing through my own bones. I was young, newly licensed to drive, and filled with a jagged, uncontainable rage that felt like broken glass in my veins. I would press my foot to the gas, watch the speedometer climb, and blare music until the speakers distorted the sound into a wall of noise. Then I would scream raw, guttural, bloody murder at the sky. I was enraged that I was alive on a planet that seemed fundamentally rigged for violence. I was screaming for people without homes I saw shivering on street corners, for the callousness I witnessed in the rigid, silent pews of the Catholic Church, and for a world that seemed to have misplaced its capacity for kindness. Eventually, the rage would exhaust itself, turning into heavy, rhythmic sobbing that left me gasping for air. For a long time, I did not want to be on this planet. I nursed a bitter, private grudge against my own soul for choosing to incarnate into a place where cruelty seemed like a foundational thread, woven into the very fabric of existence. The corridor of silence. The weight of this world became a physical, undeniable presence decades later in a small, hushed therapy room. I was a young therapist then, still leaning on the thin walls of my clinical textbooks when a client began to speak. They described experiences that shattered my understanding of how the world functioned, with networks of depravity operating with the sanctioned immunity of high level institutions, and interactions with forces that felt less like human cruelty and more like something ancient, systemic, and utterly foreign to our known reality. The stories involved names and structures that hold the very fabric of our society together, reaching into heights of power and depths of strangeness that I simply wasn't prepared to catalog. These were accounts of such calculated, far reaching control that they made the air in the room feel like lead, pressing down on my lungs until every breath required effort. For 3 years, I lived in a corridor of denial. My Western training offered me the label of schizophrenia as a shield. I tried to cling to it. If these accounts of systemic exploitation and otherworldly influence were just delusions, I was safe. The world remained a logical, if flawed, place where our leaders were human and our reality was contained. But the symptoms refused to fit the clinical box. The person sitting across from me was intelligent, bright, and functionally grounded in every other facet of their life. Their memory was sharp. Their logic was sound. The diagnosis was not psychosis. It was post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The truth was far more terrifying than any hallucination. The stories were real. I sought a therapist of my own to help me process the weight of what I was hearing, but they couldn't hold it. They didn't believe me, or perhaps they couldn't afford to. I tried to share the reality of those atrocities with a friend without sharing client details, and I was cut off before I could finish the sentence. The conversation was deemed too dark or conspiratorial to touch. I learned then a difficult lesson about human nature. The world often handles the unbearable by looking away. When a truth threatens the fundamental safety of the collective, the witness is isolated. So I learned to keep it quiet. I held the secret in my body, becoming a silent archive for the unthinkable, a vessel for a truth that the world insisted was a lie. A millennia of shadows. Seeking a way to reconcile this, I turned to my shamanic guide in the Andean mystical tradition. I had stepped onto this path because Western models of the mind were insufficient for the depths of the human shadow I was encountering. I brought the heavy, sludgy weight of these atrocities to her. The accounts from my clinic, the global news, the ancient history of conquest and blood. I was looking for an answer that would make the world right again. I wanted a spiritual bypass, a golden light that would erase the darkness I had seen. We spoke by phone, but I could sense her looking at me with the stillness of ancient stone and a gaze that didn't flinch. She simply said, "Atrocities have been going on for millennia. It is what it is." The teaching felt like a cold dismissal at first. It felt like an abandonment of the victims. But as she performed energy work to release the sticky energy I had accumulated by dwelling on these events, the wisdom began to settle. She was removing the shock. She was pointing toward a cosmology that did not require the world to be good in order for it to be sacred. She invited me to notice what focusing on these things was creating in my own body. The thoughts, the images, and the physical sensations that were weighing down my energy. My awareness was acting like a magnet, pulling the darkness of the world into my own circulation. She was teaching me that while I cannot control the abyss, I am responsible for where I place my awareness. By obsessing over the atrocity, I was feeding it my own life force, perpetuating the very imbalance I claimed to despise. The alchemy of polarity. Why the soul chooses the dark. This led me to the deeper question. Why do we even come here? Why would any soul, if it is truly a spark of the divine, choose a plane defined by such horrific polarity? I found a resonance for my guide's teachings in the book Anna, Grandmother of Jesus. It speaks of an oversoul level, a holographic realm where consciousness assesses many different timelines and realities simultaneously. From such a place, it is easier to see the potentials that facilitate growth for the interconnected wholeness of life. Although the painful experiences of human life may seem unbearable on a personal level, the end result fulfills a desire for expansion. The ultimate purpose of life is to know itself as love. Love doesn't know what love is until it experiences itself. We go through these experiences of lack and separation so that we can know what it is to have the opposite and then consciously come back to love. It is the friction of the dark that allows the light to define itself. The badass old soul. When I shared intense challenges I faced along my journey in the 10 years of apprenticeship, my guide would say, "There is something for you in this." She was reminding me that crises, as horrific as they can be, catalyze awakening. I decided that people who encounter such extremes are badass old souls. They're not delicate flowers that accidentally fell into a thresher. They're resilient, ancient adepts who chose to project a facet of themselves into the densest, most difficult neighborhood of the galaxy. These souls come here to experience the depths so they can consciously co-create their return to love. They are explorers of the shadow. They are the ones who said, "I will go into the illusion of separation. I will endure the forgetfulness. I will face the atrocities, and I will find the light anyway." This is the curriculum of the master. By moving through the density, the soul gains a medicine that it could never acquire in the blissful, unconflicted realms of pure sound and light. It becomes a seasoned traveler of consciousness, an anchor of light in a sea of darkness. The death of the rescuer. I carried these teachings, but I had not yet mastered the art of holding them without taking on the weight. For 17 plus years, I operated as a porous healer because I held a belief that the world was fundamentally broken. I believed it was my job to fix it. I was packing therapy sessions with intense inner child work and soul retrievals, pushing for a depth that was often more than the client's system could handle. I was working too fast, driven by an urgent need to ease the suffering I saw. My desire to rescue was a form of arrogance, a belief that I knew better than the soul in front of me what its journey should be. This pattern lived in my work and it lived in my life. Over the past year, as my mother's health has worsened, I have felt that same urgency rise in me. She experiences almost daily excruciating pain, and watching her decline is a weight that feels impossible to bear. For a long time, I tried to fix it for her. I made suggestions. I told her about my psychic intuitions, and I suggested modalities and practitioners. I even pulled tarot cards to show her that my hunches about the cause were true, that if only she would listen to me, she'd feel better. But the harder I tried, the deeper she dug in. I have had to face a sobering truth. Her journey is none of my business. My insights are often twisted by my own filters and my belief that suffering is something that must be avoided at all costs. My mother is a sovereign individual making her own choices. In trying to save her, I was simply playing out an old role of parentification, the caretaker for every adult in my family. I am trying to step out and let the chips fall where they may, but it is a daily struggle. I notice that when I hear about her trips to the emergency room or when I get a text about her pain, I leave my body. My energy becomes scattered and my nervous system feels frayed. It is only when I get back into my body and slow my breathing that the tears finally come. My mind wants to use spiritual knowledge to tame the grief, but the truth is simpler. I am a daughter whose mother is in pain, and it makes me cry. And as tough as that is, isn't that just the beauty of being a human who loves? The global shedding, wiping the slate. We are currently living in a time of radical global shedding. The surfacing of collective traumas is validating the truths once kept in the corridors of silence. Light is being shed on where everything has been out of balance, where cruelty has existed in the dark, and where love has been withheld for millennia. This purging is happening within our own individual psyches as well. People are reaching a breaking point. Old coping strategies are failing. We're being forced to look at our own shadows, the aspects of our psyche we have tried to repress or ignore. The slate is being wiped clean. I see now that the atrocities of the world are externalized mirrors of our own internal imbalances. We cannot end the atrocities in the world until we end the atrocities within ourselves. The revelations and the changes we make in our personal lives are what will eventually bring the planet back into balance. Forgiving the soul. Even with this understanding, the past few years have brought me to my knees. I have felt exhausted and deeply disappointed. I had to do something radical. I had to forgive my soul for bringing me here. I started by writing out all of my grievances. I let the part of me that felt like a victim to this violent planet say its piece. I let the human animal howl. And as that forgiveness unfolds, I find I have to forgive my mother's soul as well. I wish this cup would pass from her. I wish she didn't have to go through this. But I cannot assume her soul doesn't know what it is doing. If I trace it back even further, I realize I have spirit, creator, to forgive for splintering out into all these divine sparks that wanted these human experiences, even the horrific ones. I have to make peace with the truth that life is a blip and that we were all once desperate to be here. It is okay to cry and feel the depth of that suffering. That compassion is what connects us. The sovereign witness, knees on the floor. I still quiver. I'm not a finished being. I was born between a lunar and solar eclipse with Pluto in my first house, a chart that mandates a life of death and rebirth. The darkness doesn't scare me as it once did, but I am still in process. I'm still learning to forgive. I'm still afraid sometimes, and I'm certainly not fully aligned with the divine yet. I am learning to stay in a place of love as much as I'm humanly capable, loving the parts of me that trigger easily and the parts that still want to be unkind. When the world feels too heavy, I go back to the floor, knees down. I stay with my breath. Everything goes quiet. And then, almost every time, something small occurs. I hear the song of a sparrow at my window. It is a concrete, beautiful sound. The bird beckons me to stand up and look out the window. I am still here. I am finally, more fully, on the planet, standing in the sun, trusting the resilience of the soul, and knowing that I'm exactly where I chose to be. I'm not yet fearless, but I no longer look away. I am finding my way, one breath at a time. Again, this is Allison Bruner. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in next time as I continue to share stories that draw directly from the volumes of journals I kept, detailed notes from every session, reflections, and small sparks of insight. I hope these stories offer a little light for anyone navigating change, uncertainty, or the work of inner alchemy. And if they do, please consider supporting my writing by heading over to Substack at medicinestones.substack.com or make a donation at the bottom of my website at AllisonBruner.com.